It began, as tragedies often do, with something small, a fence line dispute, a few angry words shouted across the driveway, and years of tension between two neighbors in a quiet Georgia town. Nobody could have predicted that those simmering conflicts would one day evolve into a lie so devastating it would steal nearly 2 decades of a man's life. The man was named Derek Johnson. At 25 years old, he was known as reliable, hardworking, and soft-spoken. He spent his nights working long shifts at a distribution warehouse, and on weekends he repaired old cars in his garage, saving every spare dollar for the auto shop he dreamed of opening. Derek wasn't a man who sought out trouble. He avoided it. His focus was his young daughter, Maya, who was barely 3 years old at the time. He wanted to give her the stability and opportunities he had never known. Growing up, living next door was Carl Benson, a white man in his 30s with a short fuse and a reputation for stirring up disputes. Benson had filed complaints against multiple neighbors, including Derek, often accusing people of making too much noise or not respecting property lines. Derek had tried to keep his distance, but Benson seemed determined to antagonize him. People in the neighborhood whispered about Benson's run-ins with the law, minor thefts, bar fights, a burglary charge years earlier that had mysteriously disappeared from the court docket. Derek paid little attention. He had a daughter to raise and dreams to chase. He couldn't afford distractions, but everything changed on a rainy Thursday night in April of 1998. That night, a convenience store less than a mile from Derek's home was broken into. The glass door was smashed, the register emptied, and in the scuffle, the cashier, an older man named Harold Watts, was struck in the head and left unconscious. The town, already tense from an uptick in property crimes, demanded quick answers. Police flooded the area searching for suspects, but without surveillance cameras or clear evidence, they had little to go on. It was then that Carl Benson stepped forward. He told investigators that he had seen Derek Johnson walking toward the store that very night, wearing dark clothes and acting suspicious. He swore he recognized him clearly despite the rain and poor visibility. For the police, desperate for a lead, Benson's statement was enough. 2 days later, officers arrived at Derek's home. He was eating breakfast with his daughter when they knocked on the door. Confused, he stepped outside, only to be surrounded by flashing lights and uniformed men. The charges stunned him: armed robbery, aggravated assault, burglary. His protests of innocence were drowned out by the sound of handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists. Maya cried from the doorway, watching her father taken away. There was no physical evidence linking Derek to the crime. No fingerprints, no DNA, no eyewitnesses besides Carl Benson. But in a town where the word of a white man carried more weight than the word of a black man, Benson's accusation was treated as fact. Derek's alibi was that he had been working a late shift that night. He was barely investigated. His supervisor was willing to vouch for him, but by the time trial preparations began, those details had been buried under a narrative prosecutors found far more convenient. Derek Johnson, the angry young black neighbor with a motive for revenge. The trial moved swiftly. Derek's public defender was overworked and underfunded, juggling more than 100 cases at once. He met Derek only twice before standing beside him in court. He didn't call Derek's alibi witnesses. He didn't challenge Benson's credibility. He didn't even request time to investigate Benson's own criminal history, which included a burglary conviction that prosecutors quietly kept hidden. The courtroom was filled with tension. The jury, all 12 white residents from surrounding towns, listened intently as Carl Benson pointed across the room at Derek, claiming with absolute certainty that he had seen him near the crime scene that night. Benson's confidence was rehearsed, convincing. Derek tried to hold on to hope that the truth would prevail, but he felt the outcome tightening around him like a noose. The deliberation took less than 4 hours. Guilty, Derek Johnson was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was 25 years old. If he served his full sentence, he wouldn't leave until he was past 50. His daughter would be grown, his life consumed by steel bars and concrete walls. Inside prison, days turned to months, and months blurred into years. Derek faced violence, isolation, and the crushing weight of despair. He missed birthdays, school, plays, and his daughter's first day of high school. His mother grew sick and passed away without him at her side. Letters became his lifeline. He wrote constantly to lawyers, innocence projects, journalists, anyone who might listen. Most never responded. Those who did often apologized but explained they lacked the resources to take his case. Still, Derek never gave up. After a decade behind bars, one of his letters reached Lisa Hernandez, a defense attorney who specialized in wrongful convictions. Something about Derek's persistence struck her. She agreed to review the case files, expecting to find another tragic but airtight conviction. Instead, what she uncovered shocked her. There was no physical evidence tying Derek to the crime. His supposed motive, a property dispute with Benson, was thin at best. His alibi had never been properly investigated, and most damning of all, the prosecution had failed to disclose Benson's prior burglary conviction, a detail that could have destroyed his credibility as a witness. Lisa dug deeper. In 2009, she petitioned the court for DNA testing on items recovered from the crime scene, a discarded mask and gloves left near the convenience store. The results excluded Derek completely. His DNA wasn't present. Someone else had committed the crime. For Derek, it was the breakthrough he had been praying for. For the system, it was an inconvenient truth. Despite the DNA evidence, judges were reluctant to overturn the conviction. Appeals were denied, hearings delayed. The prosecutor's office argued that even without DNA, Benson's testimony was strong enough to justify the verdict. It was as if the system itself was determined to protect its mistake, no matter the cost. 9 more years passed. Derek remained in prison, a man proven innocent by science, yet still shackled by the stubbornness of a broken system. He grew older, his hair grayed, his daughter became an adult without him. Finally, in 2016, after relentless pressure from Lisa Hernandez and growing media attention, a judge vacated Derek's conviction. The ruling acknowledged the failures of the original trial, the hidden evidence, and the exculpatory DNA. Derek Johnson walked out of prison after 18 long years. Freedom, however, was not the same as justice. Derek was 43 years old. He had entered prison a young father with dreams of opening a business. He left a middle-aged man with nothing but the clothes on his back and a bus ticket. His mother was gone. His daughter was a stranger. His youth had been stolen. Carl Benson, the neighbor whose lie had destroyed Derek's life, had died years earlier, never facing accountability. The state that wrongfully imprisoned him offered no apology, no compensation. In their eyes, Derek's release was simply a correction of paperwork, not a life-shattering tragedy. Adjusting to the outside world was almost as difficult as surviving prison. Derek struggled to find work. Employers turned him away when they saw the gap in his history, even though his record was vacated. He slept on friends' couches, sometimes in shelters. He walked through a world filled with technology and changes he'd barely recognized. 18 years behind. Yet through the pain and the loss, Derek found a purpose. He began speaking publicly about wrongful convictions, sharing his story at schools, community centers, and advocacy events. He wanted people to understand that behind every case number was a human being, a family, a future stolen. He reminded audiences that he was not alone, that for every exoneree who walked free, countless others remain locked away, silenced by a system designed to resist correction. Derek's story became a symbol of the dangers of racial bias, false testimony, and unchecked prosecutorial power. It was a reminder of how fragile justice could be, and how easily it could be warped by prejudice and convenience. His life was proof that innocence was not always enough to protect someone from conviction. 18 years. That was the price of one neighbor's lie. And though Derek now walks free, the scars of those lost years remain. They linger in every missed memory with his daughter, every holiday spent alone in a cell, every morning he wakes up startled, expecting to hear the clang of prison bars. This is the story of Derek Johnson, who was framed by a neighbor, betrayed by a courtroom, abandoned by a system. A man who lost nearly 2 decades of freedom for a crime he never committed. A man whose Life reminds us all that justice, in America, is not guaranteed.